Hello, and welcome to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. In this episode, I'm constructing the last of the houses for the Overcrag. I'll be using cardboard and foam board, balsa wood, adding paint and ink washes, LED lighting, and tiny chimney pots. This is the latest part of a miniature fantasy city I've been building for 2 years using simple materials and simple techniques. This is Undercrag City. I'll be working on the cliff top here, and here, and over the sunstep here. So let's get started. I've got a block of 3 houses already under construction, and if you were paying attention in the last video, you'll have seen these in the background. You can save a lot of time in model making if you're working on more than one part at the same time. That way, when things are drying, you can be working on something else. Anyway, here I'm designing and cutting the base for the next 3 houses, which will sit on the cliff top just to the side of the manor house. I've decided on an unusual cluster. I'm going to have one tall house in the middle of the 3. I'm going to have stone wall and timber frames. I'd like to combine the various elements that I've shown everywhere in the city into these last buildings. I'm labeling my various walls here, so that when I cut my component parts I don't lose track. Changing my mind here and there. It's time to get working with some foam board. If you've been following this channel, you've seen me working with this many times. It's great stuff, it cuts nice and cleanly, and you can peel the paper off one side to do your stone design. These are triangular walls in keeping with many of the other buildings on the Overcrag. They'll have turf roofs. And once they're cut out, I'll start designing my timber walls, this time using 1mm black card. I'm working on the tall building in the centre first. I'll get this in place and work outwards from there. Sketching a concept, and then I'll draw it out more precisely. Lots of thinking here. When I'm designing a building in this manner, I like to draw as many component parts as possible. The process helps me see where errors may occur and what I can do about them. Of course, you always have to be open to the possibility that you're making mistakes and change things later, but this helps me to visualize. Labeling the walls with compass directions here. It's a helpful guide. Quite a few adjustments there. So it's important to get things cut out while I can still remember which lines are the correct ones. I've also plotted my windows and doors. There, that's most of my components cut. Time to get to work. Starting with the central building, as I said before, I'm constructing the ground floor upside down. It's just easier that way. The hole in the centre and in the bottom of this piece of wall is for me to pass wiring through later on when I install my LEDs. And that can now be attached to my base. I'll make sure that's where I want it to be. And when I'm happy with it, I'll keep working. On with the top floor. This black card is excellent to work with. I'm very glad I found it. Combination of the card and the good quality PVA glue means that I can work very quickly and everything is nice and strong. The PVA glue in particular is one area where it's worth spending a little bit of extra money. Don't go cheap, get decent quality builder's PVA. Now my stone walls. Peeling the paper off one side. I've cut my doors and windows already. And with a simple pencil, I start to draw the stonework. Horizontal lines first. I'm not using a ruler. I want things to be a little bit imperfect. Both of these sets of houses cling to the edge of the overcrag. One group next to the manor house, the other group over the sunstep. The families that built them represent the coming together of the people of the overcrag and the craggers, those hardy people from Undercrag City who built their houses in the highest and most dangerous places they could. Far be it from any self-respecting cragger to build a new home inland on a nice, safe, flat piece of ground. And so it is that their descendants now live in these dwellings, seemingly touching the sky itself. There, my buildings are constructed. I need to add a quick dark grey undercoat to the stonework. And then I can get on with some detailing. Balsa wood now. I've got a thin sheet and I'm marking out strips 2 mm wide for my planks. I tend to do quite a lot at one go. It saves time later. The first details I need to add are the undersides of the eaves. I'm cutting triangles to fit, with limited success. And I'll glue these on underneath the eaves before I move on to the rest of the detailing. All the little imperfections can be fixed up later. There, that's not too bad, and they've been trimmed to shape. Now for my main timbers, starting with my horizontals. You can see this is the stage I'd also reached with the other block of houses. From now on, I'll be working on both sets at the same time. The main verticals, and then some little detail pieces, windowsills and so on. And now the A-frames for my triangular roofs. These will tidy up the line where the timbers of the eaves meet the cardboard wall. Dab of glue on the trusty pointy stick, and trim them to the right shape. It's pretty quick work, really, but it starts to look quite effective quite quickly. You'll see I've also added the doors. Now I'm finishing off the eaves with matchsticks. Again, this is in keeping with the other buildings on the overcrag. These three houses that will sit above the sun step are quite large compared to some of their neighbours. Maybe the occupants are wealthier. Another little detail. Little rectangles of balsa wood, just to hide the join in the matchsticks. These have become a characteristic of these buildings. They really just started as a bit of a cheat. It makes you wonder how much of our own architecture developed in a similar way. Time for some paint. The timber frame walls, including all of the detailing, get undercoated in light grey. This is followed with a dark brown ink wash. I'm putting it on very heavily. It'll dry out nice and even, and it won't obscure any detail. When the brown's dry, pale yellow dry brush on all of the timber, and paying particular attention to the panels in the timber frame walls. And that yellow dry brushing is followed with white. Again, focusing quite heavily on the panels. The rest will take care of itself. If you've followed the last 70 episodes, You'll have seen this process a great many times. The dark grey stone has also been dry brushed, light grey and then white, and now I'm adding a black ink wash. It's very thin, 1 part ink to 16 parts water. Finally, all of my woodwork gets brown ink again. I start with the flat fronts of the detail, but make sure I get down the edges as well. I think this is probably my favourite part of the colouring process. It's at this point that things start to look good. When all my walls are finished, time to move on to the windows. This is a sheet of acetate that you'll have seen before. I've daubed it on both sides with Mod Podge to obscure it. I'm just cutting slices and laying them in behind the windows. I do things in this order so that the painting process doesn't get paint or ink onto the windows themselves. Now some very thin black card for door hardware. Just simple little touches. A touch of silver paint, a touch of rust ink. And I can move on to my LEDs. I've got one in each building. I've wired them all together. Now before I start on my roofs, I need some chimneys. Little pieces of foam board with the paper peeled off both sides and stonework quickly drawn in. I've added some central roof beams. I'll just stick the chimneys to that. For my chimney pots, plastic tube, cut into small pieces, and a blob of PVA. I have to use PVA here rather than any kind of plastic glue, as anything else would melt the chimney pots. Anyway, that done, I can close my roofs in. Card on the turf roofs, but paper on the tiled roof. I want it to sag. I'll paint it in with ink, just to make it bow a little bit, and let it dry. Another detail shared by all the houses on the Overcrag is these protruding roof beams. I've pre-coloured some matchsticks to account for the bits that'll be seen. And the rest will be covered with dirt. And here's my sheet of roof tiles. Piece of card from a cat food packet, drawn into rectangles 6mm by 3mm, which I cut one at a time. And starting at the bottom, off we go. If you're enjoying this episode, please feel free to like and share. And if you haven't already, please remember to subscribe. It really helps us out and the community is growing nicely. Also, remember to leave comments and questions for me down below. I answer all of them and I love hearing from you all. There. That's quite a lot of roof tiles. I've added a thin strip of paper at the top of the tiled roof as a flashing against the beam. And now I'm undercoating the stone chimneys. The tiled roof gets the same light grey as the walls of the building did. Remembering to pick out the edges, hide that cat food packet. The same brown ink wash, and this will also help to finish off those matchstick roof beams. I've ink washed my chimney pots as well. When the tiles are dry, the same light yellow, followed by white. And on the chimney pots as well. Now for some more little details, just to keep these in character with the rest of the houses around here. Window boxes. This is 4mm square basswood rod. I'm just trimming off the front edge at an angle. And these will go underneath each of the windows. I could have added these much earlier, but I'm doing it now. Doesn't really matter. And once again, my trusty pointy stick is proving very useful. Let's finish off the roof, shall we? Rust ink on all of the tiles. Remembering the edges and the chimney pots. And at last I can start adding this into the rest of the city. You'll see I've coloured my window boxes. I've soldered my wires. And in we go. My cobblestones have been extended onto this section, hand drawn with a pencil as usual, and painted dark grey. I'll finish those off in a little while. When the glue's dry, time to start blending them into the mountainside. Adding my blobs of Das clay, sculpting it with PVA and a brush. and just blending all of the parts together for that nice organic look that I like. And the turf roofs. Plenty of PVA and thin pieces of Das clay. This will give me a wonky effect without obscuring the shape too much. You can see the stairs down to the sun step there as well. I'm not being particularly delicate, and I'm working over things that I'd finished before. This is the best way to make everything seem seamless. With the clay in place and not necessarily completely dry, more PVA and plenty of sand. The sand goes everywhere that I want dirt or moss. In case you're wondering, I have a large sheet of paper underneath here protecting the city, so I don't fill it up with sand. All my rock areas get painted dark grey. Again, going over things I'd finished previously. And my dirt areas get brown. The technique of daubing the sand with water first just makes the brown paint flow a little bit better. Now I can dry brush all of my stone, starting with the cobbles. Light grey over the dark grey, which I'll follow with white. A light earth tone over the brown. It's quite fiddly. And now that same very thin black ink wash over all of the grey stone. While the black's still wet, I add patches of green where I want my mosses. And I wash those out with yellow ink. I'm not being precise, I'm looking for differences in tone. My earth gets washed with thin brown ink. In this case, 1 part brown to 4 parts water. And when that's dry, PVA and plenty of static grass just heaped on. I've been asked several times how I get rid of the surplus. When the model was smaller, I could lift it up and tip it off. But I've now reached a point where I can't do that, so I just vacuum it. Here I'm adding some clumps of long grasses and flowers, and more static grass, heaped over the lot. And we're nearly there. Let's finish off these window boxes. Generous blobs of PVA and some brightly coloured flock. Pat it down into the glue, let it dry, vacuum it off. I'm going to delicately dab it with white paint and then some patches of coloured ink. The white helps the inks just to be a bit more vibrant so that you get red against the green instead of making everything brown. And at last, there we are. The final houses of the Overcrag, and almost the last buildings of this entire project. There's one small patch of ground left, and you'll have to join me next time to see what that's going to be. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I do hope to see you next time. We're not quite done with Undercrag City. Bye for now.